We're going to start our study session, and yes, item 8 is going to be called ready. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam President. I have items 9 through 14. Item number 12 is going to be withdrawn, and items 9 through 9, 10, 11, 13, and 14 are ready. If there's any questions. Okay. I'll let you go ahead, Chief.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Mons, the Fire Chief. Item number 12. I know we put in there originally that it was going to be amended to have our inspections submitted electronically, but we were working to put different language in to say that however it's specified by the mayor. Is that able to still be kept on or no?
We're going to withdraw to let them change the language, and then we'll put it back on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All set? Thank you. Councilor Rudd.
I have items 15 through 17. Commissioner Delvecchio confirmed that these amounts match the amount that was approved by the county ledge, so we should be all good to go.
All righty. Thank you. Councilor Green.
Thank you, Madam President. I have items 18 through 30. Unless there are any questions on those, I consider them ready.
Thank you. Councilor Carney. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, Councilor Carney has items 31 through 33.
He had indicated to me he was going to hold the item 32 to get more information.
Item 32 will be held. Items 31 and 33 are ready.
Thank you. Okay. Councilor Ryan, Councilor Green.
Thank you, Madam President. I will handle item 34 for Councilor Ryan. It's an appointment to the CRB, which I'll consider ready unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Councilor Boyle, and yes, you can let that one go.
All right, I have items 35 through 38, and they are all ready unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Councilor Allen.
Thank you. I have items 39 through 63. Stephanie, can you come up for a second? Items 41 and 42, those ones were for just amendments, correct?
Correct.
Can you give me a little background on 41?
Yes. Please. Actually, Steve?
These items are discovered at the time they go to transfer the property, that the deed has one language and the ordinance has different language, so they're correcting the language so they can transfer the property.
Okay. I see on 42, that one was just a misspelling, but I wasn't sure about 41, so I just wanted to be sure exactly what it was. But it's just
I can look it up. Sometimes if it says wood house and garage, it could have said something else.
So it was just the language?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So items 39, 40, 41, and 42 are ready. Items 48 was withdrawn, 61 was withdrawn, and 62 will be withdrawn. And item 63 is ready, and all other items will be held.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item 64, a resolution to recognize the Nottingham JV football team and Brandon Pearson. That item is ready.
Thank you. Yes. Do I need to get a motion? All righty. Councilor Rudd.
I have item 65, which is the contract, so we'll be able to accept payments with credit cards at downstairs and other facilities. Commissioner Delvecchio, would you like to?
Councilors, yes. The RFP committee met, recommended Invoice Cloud. We did have 17 proposals. We interviewed 4 vendors, and this vendor has many additional options that the other vendors did not have. Specifically, and attached, you should have a copy of the fee schedule that will be incorporated into their contract. We're looking at a variety of payment methods, a little different than what we have now. But so this card company, in person as well as online. As you know, currently we accept online credit card payments, so we're extending that in person. And there's a variety of different opportunities for individuals to pay their taxes and water bills.
When does it take effect?
Well, the process would be, if approved by the council, Corporation Council will need to work with the company to enter into a contract. We're anticipating the first of the year. Our plan is to roll this out as soon as possible. Short term, our intent is to roll this out with the Parks Department, the Clinton Square, items like that. But long term, with property taxes and water bills, that gets a little more complicated. That may take a few months.
That's it?
Any questions?
No. Exciting development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Green?
Thank you, Madam President. For this item, Greg, do you want to come up and just kind of explain the process?
Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Greg Lowe, Director of City Initiatives, joined by Neil McCarrick-Burke, Transportation Planner. Before you today is a request for legislation to authorize us to continue the next stage of contract development with a provider for snow clearance on sidewalks in the city. As you know, this is part of the sidewalk snow clearance pilot. We've recommended and suggested before a 20-mile area, 40 miles of sidewalks about when you consider both sides of the road. You know, the quadrants were selected based on an analysis of vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic. Just one more quick bit of background. I think you're aware that after submitting, releasing an RFP, we did not get bidders in the first round. We continued discussions with contractors who had expressed interest and were able to reach an agreement with B&T Landscaping and Lawn Care Services based in North Syracuse, who will is prepared to proceed with us to the next stage in the process, which is working through a contract. Neil and I are here for technical questions or others if you have them.
Could we, sorry, did you have one, Councilor Green? I just was wondering if we could, I hate to be superfluous, but if we could have another committee session on this at some point, because I definitely have a number of questions I'd be curious about. I know we've met about this once before, but it definitely, in thinking about it, I'm curious as to issues of, well, particularly liability. I'm curious if the 20 miles that we've identified, if they're going to be clearing these, you know, in the Rochester system, the city obviously owns the sidewalks as well. So what are the kind of issues if, say they're using one of these driving plows and they hit a chunk of sidewalk and that chunk of sidewalk rips off and breaks? Do they have any liability for that in that situation? I don't know if this is the time to ask the questions, but going into some of those kind of issues about, you know, in Rochester, with the city owning it as well, it's a different kind of situation, whereas if, you know, with the sidewalks being relatively uneven in Syracuse and not having that kind of long-term municipal ownership that Rochester's had, I'm concerned that what will happen when they go over them with the plow and, you know, possibly damage some of these sidewalks.
So that's a great question. In working with this contractor, they have seen all of the routes. They've walked all the routes. They're aware of the condition of our sidewalks. Part of this program will be overseen, or the contractor will work closely with the sidewalk inspector from DPW as part of this process. So we know there are issues with our sidewalks, certainly, and it's important to note that this is a supplemental service, so we're not taking the responsibility from the homeowner to have sidewalks that are in good repair. We're not saying that you don't have to shovel any longer, and any damages or any issues that arise, we will handle as part of this contract, and the contractor will have some skin in the game, definitely.
Required to have insurance as well.
Greg, can you just talk about timing in terms of the next step for the contract and when you want to implement it?
With your authorization, we'll proceed quickly now to the next steps in developing a contract. We hope to be able to do that before the end of the year, which would then enable us to have the contractor acquire the necessary equipment and begin services as early as possible in the new year.
Okay. And I know one of the things we talked about was, personally, I'm supportive of this. I think it's something that the city needs to be doing. My biggest fear is putting a contractor in a situation where they can't succeed. They don't have the manpower, they don't have the equipment. So I guess to the extent that you're aware, you know, what is the calculations they've determined in terms of how many people they're going to need to hire, what kind of equipment they need, and how feasible it is to be up and running in this short time frame?
So the provider, the owners of the business are going to be directly involved in the services provided and bring on additional staffing as needed to be able to accomplish the work. They're acquiring equipment and plan to have additional staffing to support them. I don't have a numbers on that for you today. We do recognize, and they recognize, this has never been done before, and there's going to be some learning. We expect to be revising and adapting as we go. We have a strong commitment to make it successful so that we don't run into a situation like you've identified, Counselor, but we will learn from it no matter what and determine how we can continue to deploy in the future.
Okay. And I know, you know, as part of them hiring people, obviously we have city residents that, you know, are obviously looking for, so to the extent that we're able to communicate and be able to make those opportunities aware for residents, that would obviously be great.
Thank you.
And this is at no cost to the residents or business owners within the city, correct?
Correct. It's at no cost to the additional, and there's no additional cost to people who live on the route. It's covered under our current budget.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I think there's more questions. So you mentioned they've walked the routes and have seen the sidewalks. Did they make a list of the sidewalks that are already broken?
If they did, they didn't share it with us.
So nobody has looked to see which ones are broken already? So that hopefully nobody could say we broke them because of this?
And that's part of the reason why they're going to be working directly with the sidewalk inspector. We know there's some hot spots, there's some very poor areas of sidewalk, and we're not looking to have a replacement or some other sort of program tied in with this, at least not this year.
I understand we're giving you some flexibility to go make a contract, but how does it work if sometimes it snows many times more than 3 inches, sometimes it snows maybe fewer, so how do we expect the pricing to work? Are we going to plan to spend the full 170 and then if they end up working hard for it or working less hard for it, that's the way it works out? Or is it going to be an item where we might run out of money, and if there's lots of, like, how do we expect the pricing to go depending on the weather?
So what we've worked out is forgive me, I don't have the numbers, you know, we aren't in the contract stage yet, but preliminary, we've worked out a flat fee for clearing and a certain number of clearances that we would have the ability to then deploy. So if they were to go out and clear, they're going to be clearing the entirety of all the routes, and that would count as one deployment. They would receive a flat fee for that. They would bill the Department of Public Works every 2 weeks and be credited that way.
Are you able to share what that is at this point?
No, I don't have that yet.
So it'd be kind of like snow days, like we would we have a certain amount, and depending on how rough it's been, we'd be willing or less willing to use it.
Correct, and that also gets to the nature of snow removal and the weather in general. It's very tough to predict. It's not an exact science, but we're trying to build in as much flexibility as we can on our end to make sure that we can deploy them as needed.
How do we evaluate it in terms of, how long do we expect them to take after snow arrives, and how do we manage and evaluate that as the city to say, they're meeting our goals or they're not?
So in terms of how long it will take, DPW will be the one who will deploy. If we're looking at the weather and we know it's going to snow 4 inches, we will notify B&T, and they will have 12 hours from that notification to clear the routes. That gives them flexibility on their end. As I'm sure you're all well aware, it may be snowing 2 inches in the valley, but it might be 6 inches on the north side. So that's something that we built in with a bit of a buffer. We're designing this to have the possibility for 2 deployments in one day. So if it is a blizzard, if it's whiteout conditions, we would have the option to send them out in the morning, then send them out in the evening again.
Within the 20 miles, do we consider all of them to be equal? Are there priority routes within there, or how do we treat that?
So these 20 miles are the priority routes. It was developed, given some thought about development patterns in the city. Some of the north side routes are a little shorter, and that's due to the the built-up nature of the north side. Some of those turns, some of those streets might take a little longer, whereas there are sections like East Genesee Street, which are fairly straightforward, one long stretch there and back. So we've built that in, and working with our partners at the SMTC, we think we have a good first pass at this priority level of streets, which is, for the most part, primary arterials and also very busy roads.
And so the cost, is that a flat rate or is that up to?
It's a not to exceed. It's
Okay.
up to.
Okay,
It'll depend on the weather and the number of deployments.
okay.
And we'll have the ability to monitor performance throughout the contract. And if we're having difficulties or concerns that aren't being addressed, we can pull a stop and withdraw or change the terms.
So the 170 is not, we could go under?
Correct.
Okay,
Can't go over, not without coming back here.
just under. Okay.
For the
That's
go.
From a practical standpoint, I would like to see, for the city, keep note of the sidewalks that need to be repaired based on this. All right, so we don't want homeowners to have to,
Yep.
because they're on the route, all of a sudden all those get redone at their cost. So I'd like to have the city keep track of that. I think it would be good information to have.
Thank you. That's reasonable.
The up to $170,000, can you describe where the money comes from, and can you confirm or deny that it comes directly from the fill the pothole fund?
I don't know if I can answer that.
So I can't answer definitively that it doesn't come out of the pothole fund, but that's not the intent here.
Counselor, it comes from the existing DPW budget, and we'll be working to gain efficiencies in the budget to be able to fund the program. There's no intent to reduce spending, though, in areas such as potholes or roads.
Okay. And any more questions? And before I ask for a motion, I want to take the time, because a lot of you won't be in the room for our last meeting, and I think I can safely say on behalf of myself and my colleagues, have a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now I need a motion. Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.